Yesterday, the Occupy encampment right here in Washington, D.C. had a showdown with the police. Now, unlike encampments across the country, from New York to Oakland to Los Angeles, D.C. has so far made it without eviction threats and without any major clashes with the cops. But yesterday, after protesters set up a large wooden structure, police came in, ruled the structure unsafe for occupancy, and began removing protesters from it, which resulted in a standoff that took hours, and even a giant cherry picker being brought in to peel the remaining protesters off of the roof. Now, overall, 31 people were arrested, 15 for crossing a police barricade, and 16 others for refusing to vacate the structure. While the encampment at large is still there and was not evicted, once again, we saw what's become a very disturbing trend across the country. Police telling the media to go away. Our very own Jenny Churchill was there yesterday, and she's here to give us more details. Jenny, I'm so happy that you were down there. Yesterday I was traveling, so thanks for being our person on the ground. Tell us, how many hours were you there for? Because I know that this took a long time.
Yeah, I was there for about 6 hours, and it was a random 6 hours because I hadn't planned on going down there at all. I just happened to walk by when the police were shutting down the streets, and I thought, this might be something we would want to keep an eye on.
And so how did it really progress, would you say? I mean, do you even know why they put this wooden structure up?
Well, that was a question that was really hard to get answered. The only thing that people would say was that they built this structure in order to protect themselves from the elements, and that they believed they had every right to build this structure because it was a temporary structure and not meant to be there permanently. I think that the way they were classifying it as a temporary structure was they weren't going to put on a roof. They were going to put tarps on top of it. They just didn't get that far before the police showed up.
The elements being the weather.
Yeah, though they said that, you know, the weather was what was going to keep them from staying there, and they were trying to protect themselves from the weather. You know, I asked, how did this happen? And they said, well, we built it last night, in the middle of the night. And I said, how on earth did you go that long without anyone noticing that you were doing that? And I guess the police came in the morning, noticed it was there, told them they had until noon or some other deadline to take it down, and then when they didn't take it down, that's when they closed off the streets and kind of manned the area around the structure.
Yeah, tell us more details about exactly what happened when the cops showed up. I mean, were they in riot gear, or were they just wearing helmets? You know, what did it look like?
At first, when the cops were protecting the perimeter, they were just wearing everyday normal outfits. Eventually, it progressed to them wearing kind of riot-type helmets, as well as getting pepper spray canisters that were in bags that were then attached to their legs. And that's kind of when it got really tense, was when everyone started to realize they have pepper spray, and if they have it, that means they're thinking they might be using it. And there were all kinds of calls throughout the entire area of, you know, get bandanas, get antacid and water and a water bottle, everyone get ready. And there were actually a couple children running around that were about 10 years old, and people were saying this isn't somewhere you want to be.
Okay, so like I said, there were 31 people that were arrested overall. Some of them, it literally took hours to arrest them to get the cherry picker. I just remember reading your tweets, other people's tweets, that there was a guy named David that was the last one holding on, that he somehow managed to get back up, that people were chanting his name.
It was kind of a progression. So you had about the first 16 people that were arrested were people trying to cross the police barrier to get to the structure after they had kind of secured it off. Then inside the structure, you had the people on the ground, and as well as the people that were sitting on the roof holding on. So there was the initial arrest of people trying to break the line. Then they went in eventually and arrested all the people on the ground. And then that's when you saw the cherry picker come in. That's when you saw the armored vehicle that came in front that David then jumped on top of and danced on and then got back on. That's kind of where all the cheering for him happened.
Okay, so that sounds like there was a lot of action going on, but you know, like I said, one of the things that I've been incredibly disappointed with that we've seen in, we saw it at Zuccotti Park in New York, we saw it in Los Angeles, is that the police have been trying to block the media access. And so what did they do yesterday?
Yesterday, it was slightly different. They weren't kind of forcing the media out, but they did on multiple occasions make announcements that the media needed to go across the street. If you're a member of the press, please go across the street. And the thing is, from across the street, you couldn't see anything. They had all of the streets closed surrounding the area except for the part where the actual camp was. So you had to be there to see anything, and they wanted you to go somewhere where you couldn't see something. And actually, when they were making these calls, the protesters themselves started chanting, and actually I think we have a clip of that.
That's right. Let's take a look.
Media state! Media state! Media state! Media state! Media state!
So the media stayed, right?
Yeah, and it was actually really shocking because when they came around, I kind of made eye contact with a cop who was saying, if you're press, you need to go across the street. And I turned around and said to someone, did he say what I think he just said? And they started freaking out and saying, please don't leave, please don't leave. It was very obvious that they wanted people there to witness whatever might happen. And I think at that point it was starting to get very obvious that any spark could have set off some type of serious confrontation, whether it was a spark from the police or from the protesters.
But in the meantime, during those 31 arrests that were made, the cherry picker incident and all of that, was there any violence? Did the tensions actually come to a boil?
Violence, not so much. There were a couple of tense moments. One was where a dog got across the barrier and was spooking the horses, and they were going crazy. Others where people were throwing things at the people on the structure, kind of supplies, and when they started throwing things like water bottles, those are like projectiles, and that got very tense. The cops were aggressive in their arrests. I'm not saying that they were overly aggressive, but people were disturbed by, people being taken to the ground, but...
All right, I want to talk about, too, the thing about the D.C. camp here is that as we watch the evictions across the country, you and I were in Zuccotti Park together, and we went to go do the show there, and, well, now it's no longer there. Los Angeles was the second largest Occupy camp that was left across the country, and now it's been evicted. And D.C. really has stood out in the sense that, like I said, until yesterday, until they put up this wooden structure, you could say there weren't really a lot of big clashes, that it's still been holding strong, and it's still there right now. They didn't end up evicting them at the end of all this. So when you spoke to some of the protesters, did you ask them, how they feel about that, why they're still staying?
There were a lot of levels to that, actually, and there were arguments that happened within the occupation itself of people saying, is this structure worth losing the entire camp? And they were always shouted down, but there were people that were seriously raising that question. The structure is going to go. Is it worth losing all of these other tents and everything we've built? And it was kind of a very divisive topic. I think that one reason that they have stayed for so long is because people are making a conscious effort to try to cooperate with the police, to do what's right. And I think that the structure kind of was something that went off on a tangent that was different. And the justification, I think, is that they say, they kept chanting, as long as money is free speech, temporary structures are free speech. So, I think that the difference with the other occupations is an effort on both sides to make it work. But this was kind of a non-negotiable.
So once again, it was one of those things where you see a little bit of a division. In Zuccotti Park, it was the drum circle that was the biggest point of division. Here, it's whether you have a wooden structure or not. But in the meantime, it's good to know that the D.C. camp is still there, that not all of them have completely disappeared around the country. Jenny, thank you so much. We're happy that you were there yesterday. And, well, we'll see you later on the show. Thanks.
Thank you.